Imagine falling in love with someone you think is your soulmate, only to discover that the person you trusted with your heart is hiding a terrifying secret. This is the story of Grace, a woman who thought she had found the perfect partner, only to learn that the woman she loved was not who she seemed. What started as a dream relationship quickly spiraled into a nightmare, as secrets emerged that no one, not even Grace, could have ever predicted. Are you ready to hear the shocking truth? Stay with me, because this story will leave you speechless. Grace was a vibrant woman in her late 20s, someone who approached life with a sense of optimism and an open heart despite the disappointments she'd faced. After several failed relationships that left her doubting if she'd ever find true love, she met Sylvia on a dating app. From their first conversation, Grace felt an instant connection, drawn to Sylvia's captivating charm, quick wit, and an aura of mystery that made her irresistible. Sylvia seemed perfect, intelligent, adventurous, and deeply attentive. Their whirlwind romance unfolded effortlessly, and within weeks, they were inseparable. Grace's friends and family quickly noticed how happy she seemed, but a few couldn't shake an uneasy feeling about Sylvia. She rarely spoke about her past, skillfully deflecting questions with vague, enigmatic responses. Grace brushed off their concerns, dismissing them as paranoia fueled by jealousy or overprotectiveness. She saw Sylvia as a beacon of excitement in her otherwise routine life. However, strange little moments began to chip away at her perfect image of their relationship. Personal items would go missing from Grace's apartment, only to reappear in odd places. Sylvia often left for work late at night, offering excuses that felt oddly rehearsed. Once, Grace overheard a cryptic phone conversation, but when she asked about it, Sylvia laughed it off, saying it was just a misunderstanding. Still, Grace chose to overlook the peculiarities, convincing herself that every relationship had its quirks. Yet deep down, unease began to creep in, a faint whisper she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Sylvia's captivating presence had a way of silencing doubt, but the cracks in her facade were beginning to show. It was only a matter of time before Grace would be forced to confront the unsettling reality hidden beneath Sylvia's charm. Within 6 months of dating, Sylvia convinced Grace to move in with her, a decision that marked the beginning of an unsettling turn in their relationship. At first, Grace was thrilled by the idea of sharing a home with the woman she thought was her soulmate. The apartment was beautiful, filled with expensive furniture and a sense of refinement that made Grace feel both excited and nervous. But soon, small, peculiar things began to happen that made Grace question her decision. Sylvia, who had been the picture of poise and control when they were apart, began showing strange signs of anxiety at home. She'd get up in the middle of the night and disappear for hours without explanation. When Grace would ask where she'd been, Sylvia would offer vague responses, claiming she had work to finish or that she had gone for a walk to clear her mind. It wasn't the odd hours that bothered Grace at first. It was the way Sylvia avoided eye contact, the way she seemed uncomfortable with the simplest of questions. The real tension began when Grace noticed scratches on Sylvia's arms, sometimes on her neck, as though she'd been in some kind of struggle. Sylvia explained them away as minor accidents, but the frequency of them raised suspicion. One day, Grace found a box of strange documents hidden in the back of a closet, sealed envelopes filled with codes and unfamiliar symbols. Sylvia dismissed them as old business files, but there was something off about the way she reacted. Grace couldn't shake the feeling that Sylvia was hiding something important, something dark. Even stranger, packages began arriving at their home addressed to Sylvia, but they were always in unfamiliar names. When Grace tried to ask, Sylvia's responses became increasingly curt, as though she was growing irritated with her questions. Then there was the locked room in the apartment, a room Sylvia would never let Grace enter, despite her curiosity. Sylvia would make excuses about it being her private space where she worked. But Grace couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread in her stomach, and her unease grew with each passing day. Something wasn't right, but she couldn't yet put her finger on what it was. As the days passed, the unsettling feelings Grace had been pushing aside slowly began to overwhelm her. The cracks in Sylvia's behavior were impossible to ignore any longer. Grace could no longer dismiss the late-night absences, the strange scratches on Sylvia's body, or the cryptic packages arriving at their door. She began doing some digging of her own. She researched the names on the packages, trying to make sense of what they might mean. Her heart sank when she found a connection to missing persons reports, each one linked to places Sylvia had visited or mentioned in passing. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. Sylvia's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered across her home and the internet, were beginning to form a terrifying picture. There were whispers in the articles about people vanishing without a trace, each connected to mysterious circumstances that seemed to always lead back to the same woman. As Grace's suspicions grew, so did the distance between her and Sylvia. The once constant presence of the woman she loved started to feel like a shadow in her life, cold and elusive. Sylvia's mood shifts became more erratic. One minute she would be sweet and affectionate, the next, distant and cold. Grace confronted Sylvia about the strange behavior, but every time she did, Sylvia would deflect or respond with anger, claiming that Grace was imagining things. She pushed Grace away with manipulative words, and for a moment, Grace considered that perhaps she was being paranoid. But something in her gut told her otherwise. She started keeping a close eye on Sylvia, even following her when she left for her late-night work sessions. What she discovered sent a chill down her spine. Sylvia wasn't working. She was meeting someone in secret, someone Grace didn't know. Sylvia's steps grew more deliberate and secretive, and Grace began to wonder if she was being followed herself. One weekend, when Sylvia was away on one of her unexplained trips, Grace decided to take matters into her own hands. She found the cabin Sylvia had mentioned once, a secluded place in the woods where Sylvia claimed she went to clear her mind. Against all reason, Grace drove to the cabin, her mind racing with fear and anticipation. What she found there changed everything. Inside, she found remnants of what could only be described as a sinister collection, a stash of journals, photos, and items belonging to people who had gone missing. It was undeniable now. Sylvia had been hiding a dark secret, and Grace was about to uncover the full extent of it. Grace's discovery at the cabin left her reeling, the evidence of Sylvia's monstrous double life staring her in the face. As she searched the dimly lit space, her hands trembled with a mix of fear and disbelief. The cabin was far from the peaceful retreat Sylvia had described. It was a cold, eerie place, filled with unsettling remnants of past victims. The journals, each meticulously written in Sylvia's hand, detailed the psychological manipulation, control, and abuse she had inflicted on others. Names and faces of people who had vanished over the years were scattered across the pages, along with chilling notes about her experiments. Grace's heart pounded as she flipped through the photographs, images of people she recognized from the missing person reports. Their eyes filled with fear and confusion. They were all tied to Sylvia. The realization crushed her. Sylvia wasn't just hiding a past. She was actively involved in a twisted world of violence and manipulation. Grace felt a deep sense of betrayal. The woman she had trusted more than anyone was a monster, preying on the vulnerable. As she moved through the cabin, Grace found blood-stained clothing hidden in a trunk, and in another room, disturbing objects that seemed to have been taken as trophies from victims. It was enough to confirm the horror she had been unwilling to accept for so long. Panic set in as Grace realized how close she was to uncovering the truth. She could no longer ignore the signs, the missing people, the strange behaviors, the dark secrets Sylvia had carefully kept hidden. Suddenly, Grace heard the sound of tires on gravel, the unmistakable crunch of wheels pulling up to the cabin. Sylvia was back. Her stomach twisted in fear as Grace hid the evidence as best she could, hoping Sylvia wouldn't notice she'd been there. When Sylvia entered, her demeanor was calm, almost too calm, as though nothing was out of place. Grace's heart raced as she tried to act natural, but she knew she had only moments before Sylvia would realize something was wrong. In that moment, Grace made a choice. She couldn't stay in this toxic, dangerous situation any longer. Her only chance was to escape, to leave Sylvia behind and go to the authorities. The escape was tense, with Grace barely managing to slip away unnoticed, her mind still processing everything she had just discovered. She raced back to their apartment, her hands shaking as she dialed the police, ready to expose Sylvia for the monster she truly was. But when the authorities arrived, Sylvia had already disappeared. Grace's bravery had revealed the truth, but the darkness she had uncovered was far from over. Sylvia was on the run, and no one knew where she would strike next. The days following Sylvia's disappearance were a blur of media frenzy, police investigations, and public shock. Grace became an unwilling focal point of the story, her testimony used as the cornerstone in unraveling Sylvia's web of deception and violence. As the truth about Sylvia's past emerged, the public was horrified to learn that she was not just a woman with a few dark secrets, but a dangerous fugitive responsible for a string of disappearances that spanned several years. Grace's once perfect world had been shattered, and the woman she had loved was now known to be a ruthless predator. Despite the shock and the fear that gripped her, Grace felt a sense of relief that the truth had come to light. Sylvia's true identity was revealed. She had been living under multiple false names, using various aliases to avoid detection as she moved from town to town, leaving destruction in her wake. The authorities launched a nationwide manhunt, but Sylvia's skills at evading capture seemed almost supernatural. With every passing day, the fear of her return loomed over Grace, and the haunting question remained: where was Sylvia? Could she strike again? Grace's life after Sylvia was nothing like she had imagined. The once vibrant woman found herself living in constant fear, even as the police tried to assure her that they were doing everything in their power to find Sylvia. She moved to a new city, cutting ties with everything familiar, hoping that the distance would allow her to heal. But the trauma of what she had uncovered lingered in her mind. The mental scars left by the manipulation, the lies, and the chilling realization that the woman she had trusted was capable of such monstrous acts were not so easily erased. She sought therapy, trying to make sense of her past and reclaim some semblance of normalcy. But nothing could erase the images of the cabin, the photos of the missing people, and the feeling of betrayal that haunted her every waking moment. The case remained unsolved, and Sylvia's whereabouts remained a mystery. As the months passed, the news coverage of Sylvia's crimes slowly faded, but for Grace, the nightmare never truly ended. She became an advocate for victims of manipulation and violence, using her story to warn others of the dangers of blind trust. Yet, even as she helped others find their strength, the question still plagued her. Was Sylvia still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike again? Imagine falling in love with someone who seems perfect in every way. Now, imagine discovering that the person you trusted with your heart is hiding a terrifying secret, one that could destroy everything you thought you knew about them. This is the story of Grace, a woman who thought she found her soulmate, only to uncover a chilling truth that shattered her world. You might think you know what happens next, but trust me, the truth will shock you. Have you ever wondered if the person you love could be hiding something dark? Stay with me, because this is a story you won't believe.